Hey, gang. Thank you all for being patient. We had a little bit of a technical difficulty, but welcome back for Stir Crazy, episode number 79. I can't really believe that. Performing progressivism. That is what we have seen happening virtually with the Democratic National Convention as they have made it official. Joe Biden will be representing the Democrats as if there was any other choice at this point of the race to take on Donald Trump. Trump-Pence. So it's Biden-Harris for Trump-Pence. Yeah, that's old news. Well, we have some clips and highlights of the convention because I'm guessing if you're like me, you probably could not stomach watching the Democratic National Convention for these now 3 nights straight for hours on end. Just too much chicanery, too many shenanigans, too much, are y'all motherfuckers for real kind of moments. I wasn't able to deal with it. But if you're like me, we have some highlights or lowlights as they were. And we're going to actually take a moment to figure out exactly what does Biden-Harris stand for, especially in this moment, especially when we're looking at over 10% unemployment. We're looking at people facing an eviction. You can't even call it a crisis at this point, an eviction tsunami. I mean, shit is real bad. A lot of places, can't forget COVID, the reason for the whole season that we're in right now with over 170,000 dead or quickly approaching that number thereabouts and 5+ million people infected. I mean, we're in a bad spot. And I'm not sure that the Democrats are rising to meet the moment. So we're going to get into all that. And I'm not even going to go waste time with the rundown because we late as shit. So we're just going to get into this conversation. I'm joined today with, of course, Mr. Thursday is what they call him. He is our visuals and research producer here at The Real News, Mr. Andrew Corkery. And we're joined today with Ricci Sergienko. He is from the People's City Council of Los Angeles, a grassroots organization out there that is making a lot of noise. Ricci, I'm so glad that you are able to join Andrew and I today on the program. Thank you so much.
Yes, and Ina Morten is here. I don't know if you can see her on.
Oh, Ina, hi. Welcome. How are you, Ina? Ina's also from the same organization, the People's City Council of Los Angeles. I'm very excited that you both were able to be with us today on Stir Crazy. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no, we're excited. And I think my colleague / my boss, Adriel Hampton, has been on this show before as well.
Several times.
Yeah, so I'm a digital media strategist with the Adriel Hampton Group. So Adriel and I work. Yeah, Adriel and I work very closely together. Yeah. So it was funny that this happened. And when this request came through, I was like, oh my God, Adriel I think he was on the show last week.
He was on Friday.
Yeah. I was like, oh, I gotta take this one because
that's what happened.
But then we also wanted to invite Ina on. I'll let Ina introduce herself, but Ina is an impressive Zoomer organizer in Los Angeles. We always want her to represent us because she's so great.
Well, welcome, Ina. Well, I that's something I want us to get into as part of the conversation because there's a lot of activity happening in and around Los Angeles around a bunch of issues. And I know you guys are out there fighting on behalf of the eviction crisis, on behalf against police brutality. Of course, the wildfire shit looks insane right now coming out of Cali. So climate change front of mind for Californians. But I wanted to get you guys' take also on the Democratic Convention, the platform that they do or do not stand for at this point. And, you know, how are people in California, like-minded leftists, what's the reaction to Kamala Harris specifically as a selection for VP? But locally, I mean, y'all be giving I keep calling him Gil Garcetti. It's not Gil.
Fuck all Garcettis, though. Fuck all Garcettis. Fuck right. Gil Garcetti and Eric Garcetti.
Eric Garcetti, yes, the mayor of Los Angeles. Y'all got all the smoke for Eric Garcetti, and it's a wonderful thing to see. But before we get into that, guys, I want us to talk briefly, if we could, about the convention. Like I said, I couldn't bring myself to watch the convention. I choose me, you know. I choose self-love and self-care in this age of coronavirus, so I could not stomach it. You damn right.
100%.
Dwayne, let's start off with that montage that Andrew put together of some of the low-light speakers from this year's DNC 2020. Oh, okay. We're still downloading the thing, so it's fine. All right, so we're going to hold off. We're going to press pause on the DNC convention thing if we could for a second and get back to
no worries.
Okay. I love doing live stuff. We can talk about whatever.
Ready. We're so ready.
Well, let's talk about LA. Let's stay in Cali. Like I said, I want to talk about politics, but the first thing I have to ask about is the wildfire situation, because again, it's insane. Cali is also dealing simultaneously with a heat wave. The news coming out of San Francisco is that they are experiencing some of the poorest air quality, not to mention tens of thousands of people had to flee their homes. I'm not sure how dire the situation is in and around Los Angeles. Maybe you guys can bring us up to speed, and what's the latest happening out there with that situation?
Yeah, I can go ahead. So I grew up in LA and in California. So, wildfire season has always been kind of a fact of life. But now it's like way and far away, completely different than it was before. And it's pretty dire. Like, I say a lot that in this, kind of political moment, it's been a time of recognizing that every issue is intertwined. And California state right now is a perfect example of that. Like, we can't fight our wildfires because so much of our firefighter population is made up of essentially slave incarcerated inmates.
Explain that part for people who don't know.
Yeah, so a big chunk of California's like firefighter force is actually incarcerated inmates who are being paid, $1
over 50%.
To fight fires. And when they come out of the system, they can't even legally become firefighters, which is kind of just ironic and horrible. But so we're having a crisis because we don't have enough firefighters to be slave labor for us, because they have COVID because of this mismanagement of the pandemic and how it's in fact affected our prison population. So it's like an environmental justice issue. It's a housing issue, it's a racial justice issue, and it's kind of just a massive shit show right now. But
yeah,
we'll have a change in leadership this November, maybe.
And that's the strange thing. A lot of people look, Adriel pointed this out actually last week, how conservative the United States is, that California looks so liberal to everybody else.
Such a joke.
Right. I mean, people will be like, oh, Gavin Newsom from San Francisco. Oh, Jerry Brown, this big, environmental hippie. I'm sure California's got to be leading the way on all these issues.
I mean, I love that you have Adriel on, because Adriel and I are pretty aligned on a lot of issues. But Gavin Newsom's a fucking joke. Like, that dude is a fraud. No, but seriously, he cut the climate budget for the next fiscal year by over 90%. He said to us personally at the end of last year that he would shut down this gas storage facility in Aliso Canyon that was home of the largest gas leak west of the Mississippi. And it's still leaking air, and it's highly susceptible if there's an earthquake or any natural disaster over there. He said to a group of mothers from that area that he pledged to them that he would shut it down. And now Aliso Canyon gas storage facility is being used more than ever. He's a fraud. He said earlier this year that he was going to pause granting new fracking permits to fracking companies. However, he's gone back on that now. The state is granting fracking permits. So this dude, we're not even progressive. He's just a fucking joke.
Adam. And at Gavin Newsom, we hope you caught all of that, Gavin Newsom. That was for you. All right, guys, we are ready to start checking out some of the lowlights of the 2020 Democratic National Convention, which is going to send Joe Biden and Kamala Harris as the Democrats' choice to take on Donald Trump. Let's take a look at that montage, shall we, Dwayne?
As you've seen by now, this isn't a normal convention. It's not a normal time.
We are at a crossroads. And we need leaders equal to this moment of sacrifice and service. We need Joe Biden and Kamala Harris.
That empathy, that decency, the belief that everybody counts, that's who Joe is. Along with the experience needed to get things done, Joe and Kamala have concrete policies that will turn their vision of a better, fairer, stronger country into reality.
Donald Trump's failure of leadership has cost lives and livelihoods.
As Michelle Obama and Bernie Sanders warned us, if Trump is reelected, things will get even worse. That's why we need unity now more than ever.
This administration has shown it will tear our democracy down if that's what it takes for them to win. So we have to get busy building it up so that we leave no doubt about what this country that we love stands for.
Vote for law enforcement purged of racial bias that keeps all our streets safe. Vote for justice for George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Ahmaud Arbery, because Black lives matter.
This virus, it has no eyes, and yet it knows exactly how we see each other and how we treat each other. And let's be clear, there is no vaccine for racism. We must elect a president who will bring something different, something better. We must elect Joe Biden.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to laugh in Kamala Harris' face.
I'm sorry I had to put that together for y'all. I had to watch through all that stuff. It was a little bit traumatic, but I'm glad that we got to see the distillation of insanity that is the Democratic Party in 2020.
I just hit Andrew in the Slack because I'm like, wait a second. Hillary Clinton did not just say vote for law enforcement. I said, Andrew, did she just say vote for law enforcement? Yes, the fuck she did. You want to talk about? Go ahead, Ricci.
This clip did not make it in there, but Joe Biden said most cops are good on the first day, and I fucking lost my shit. I was like, are you serious? Like, this is what we're doing right now? It's like...
I'm so tired. Okay, all right. Before we even talk about it, let me play this Trump ad for y'all, Trump-Pence ad, just to show you, like, I feel like all of us are in the twilight zone because the Democrats are one way and Trump thinks that these guys are, you know, just the Black Panthers reincarnated 2020. And it's like, sir, please, enough with the delusions. Run that Trump-Pence ad, Dwayne, for shits and giggles. Everybody can get a nice laugh off of this.
Their force and peaceful protesters.
The vast majority of the protests have been peaceful.
And they're going and just pulling people off the street to make it seem like there are problems going on when all that's happening are peaceful protests.
And our peaceful protesters' ability to get out at night.
Most of these protests have been peaceful.
I applaud these protesters.
The majority of these protesters are peaceful. They have been peaceful for weeks.
It has continued, for the most part, peaceful.
It was peaceful. We had a number of peaceful protests.
DJ McG, I'm so sorry. He hit us in the comments and said, please don't make us watch this, please. Not even talking about the Trump thing. He was actually talking about the Democratic National Convention montage. So just to give you an idea of the tenor of this election, because it's the fact that Trump is actually probably in the same lane with Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, at least when it comes to this issue, because Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are cool with all the Democratic mayors who've been throwing the protesters in jail and hitting them with all these ridiculous charges and allowing these local law enforcement agencies to tear gas them and shoot them with projectiles and all kinds of civil rights violations. So I don't even know where to start. Where shall we begin when it comes to what we've been witnessing from the Democrats from over this performance of progressivism? Andrew, let's start with you about at least the issue of of law enforcement and how the whole Black Lives Matter is it's such a disconcerting thing to see Hillary Clinton talk about Black Lives Matter. Like, that indicates that this is totally a trendy thing for her. This is something, a buzzword that tests well, in focus groups. It's not some shit that she actually believes, because she don't believe that shit. But I'm sorry. Go ahead, Andrew.
No, I mean, we're basically just witnessing the neoliberal Democratic establishment's attempt to try and co-opt the political popularity of these protests for their own neoliberal, market-based, racist police enforcement agenda. I mean, that's basically what we're seeing. I mean, they recognize that there's a certain contingent within the Democratic Party that values what's happening in the streets every single day, and that has been happening, even though the media is not really covering it with the veracity that they were covering it back when George Floyd died. And so, in the first month and the aftermath of that, they were covering it pretty much every single day, everything going on. But yeah, I mean, they're totally disconnected from reality, because the genesis of these protests is related to defunding the police, is relating to not just piecemeal neoliberal reform, but an actual reimagining of what the police as an entity is and whether or not we need it as to be a successful society or not. So they're basically trying to say this same old trope that they've been saying, ever since, forever, really. But when Obama was in there, they were saying the same thing, that there's good cops and that we have to get the bad apples out of there, and we don't have a system in place to get the bad apples out. Instead of just knowing for a fact that based on the lived experiences of people of color, based on the data that we have, based on what institutions and politicians these police unions support overwhelmingly, we know that these institutions are inherently racist, so we can't reform something that is broken from within. It's a proverbial orchard of racism and systemic destruction of people's lives, and particularly, people's lives of color and poor white people as well. And so to not really recognize the genesis of what's bringing this revolutionary moment to the forefront is to be disingenuous and to try to co-opt that for your own political gain, which is exactly what we're seeing.
Indeed. Ina, I wanted to get you in on here because, let me read a comment real quick from the comments. Black Magic, friend of the show. Thank you so much for watching us, Mom. They say, you mean the RNC Light Convention. Let's go back to the 90s tour. The amount of Republicans that were invited to this shindig, not surprising, but again, it seemed as though that the Biden ticket was this purposeful, intentional move to the center as opposed to being pulled to the left, right? Which is what some people seem to think that you can do with Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, is pull them to the left. Well, why in the fuck did they invite all these goddamn Republicans, John Kasich and Cindy McCain, talking about Joe Biden and my husband, John McCain, used to be racist best friends all together. Let's invite all the Republicans to the show. What was your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, RNC light is absolutely correct. I almost don't even want to say light, because it kind of really just felt like the RNC period. I also put me first, and I did not watch the entire convention. I think I tweeted in the middle of getting a root canal, which is more painful, DNC night 2 or getting my root canal. And everyone agreed it was watching DNC night 2. So I think for everybody who's left of the now right-wing, or perhaps always right-wing Democratic Party, this whole convention was not just a slap in the face, but clearly was not intended for any of us at all. Just as the Kamala Harris pick was not intended for any of us at all. And it's been really gross to see white neoliberals kind of propping up, like, look at Kamala Harris, this incredible liberal woman of color from California. And then here I am, a woman of color in California, understanding that her pick is absolutely worse than nothing to me, because this is someone who has actively spent her entire career fighting to incarcerate Black and brown Californians. And, just watching her get tokenized by the white center has just been really, really gross and also really typical. You would have to pay me a lot of money to watch entire.
Oh, my goodness. I want us to take another look at an excerpt from another one of the speakers, Ricci. Senator Elizabeth Warren, who was in contention, I guess, to be a VP, but she just got on the team, I suppose, and was like, fuck it, I'll just be a team player and go along with Joe Biden and all the stuff that his career, it's weird. Like Joe Biden's career almost goes entirely counter to stuff that Elizabeth Warren worked on prior to arriving in the Senate.
It's directly in conflict. They have gone head to head on issues before. So it doesn't. Elizabeth Warren's great. She's great.
Oh, well, then you're going to love this clip from Elizabeth Warren. Dwayne, let's take a look at that.
Now, I love a good plan, and Joe Biden has some really good plans. Plans to bring back union jobs in manufacturing and create new union jobs in clean energy. Plans to increase Social Security benefits, cancel billions in student loan debt, and make our bankruptcy laws work for families instead of the creditors who cheat them. These plans reflect a central truth. Our economic system has been rigged to give bailouts to billionaires and kick dirt in the face of everyone else.
Now, we know that Joe Biden has been backed heavily by the banks, by the credit card industry. But when she said specifically about the bankruptcy bill, I'm like, lady, do you know who you're talking about? Joe Biden siding with the Senate Republicans during the Bush administration, George W. Bush administration, to pass bankruptcy bill, bankruptcy law that really fucked over people, especially who were dealing with student loans. Go ahead, Ricci. What was your take on Elizabeth Warren accolades for Joe Biden in that arena?
Well, before we get to that, I really liked the BLM thing in the back.
Right.
It was really a solid sign of solidarity, and she's truly down with the movement because she put up some blocks in the background. There it is. No, that's one, I'm being sarcastic, but
I know.
Pod Save America and like all these libs were going crazy about them. Like, God damn, she hasn't even said anything about defunding the police, which is what, like my conversation all the time. And I don't mean to derail from your question, but the conversation about how people were feeling when Kamala was appointed, like we've been saying, fuck cops, all cops are bastards for the whole summer. We've been saying defund the police. And that's from following BLM's lead, especially in LA. BLM LA has put in work for a long time, and that's who we try to keep up with as an organizing standard. And they've been saying defund the police, and they've been saying all cops are bad. But then, when Kamala Harris gets appointed, and we say, oh well, she's part of the same system, and she's a quote unquote cop. And people got upset at us for mentioning these things, but it's like, if you're down with defunding the police, we are not going to celebrate Kamala Harris as vice president. Those two things do not work together. And so the BLM thing with Elizabeth Warren was like, okay, that's great. I love the symbolism, but what is she actually doing? And then into your question about Warren endorsing her and saying those things about the credit card bureau or financial protection. I'm almost positive that Warren and Biden had conflict around the Consumer Financial Bureau that Elizabeth Warren was setting up, and there was during the primaries they said that they did not get along, and Elizabeth Warren. When Joe Biden tried to take credit for something that Elizabeth Warren and President Obama had worked closely on, Warren was like, wait a second, Joe, you absolutely did not do that. But no, it's great. It's great that the Democratic Party is all coalescing around Joe Biden. He has the most progressive platform ever. And we're really excited.
Are we excited, kids? I wanted us to hit one of the last clips from this, and then we shall move along in the conversation, because everyone in the comments is extremely annoyed that we're playing clips from this speech.
Yeah, they want to hear us roast Eric Garcetti. and I'm saving a lot of all the smoke I have for Eric Garcetti. So
hey, we're here to give people what they want, totally, and I know that they are totally here for that. But this last clip comes from former First Lady Michelle Obama, and it was almost another one of those pound cake leaning, pull up your pants. We have to put the country on our back. I'm interpreting that as Black people, even more specifically Black women. And I was kind of turned off by her comments here. Dwayne, let's take a listen to that, please.
We have to vote for Joe Biden in numbers that cannot be ignored. Because right now, folks who know they cannot win fair and square at the ballot box are doing everything they can to stop us from voting. They're closing down polling places in minority neighborhoods. They're purging voter rolls. They're sending people out to intimidate voters, and they're lying about the security of our ballots. These tactics are not new. But this is not the time to withhold our votes in protest or play games with candidates who have no chance of winning. We have got to vote like we did in 2008 and 2012. We've got to show up with the same level of passion and hope for Joe Biden. We've got to vote early, in person if we can. We've got to request our mail-in ballots right now, tonight, and send them back immediately. And follow up to make sure they're received, and then make sure our friends and families do the same. We have got to grab our comfortable shoes, put on our masks, pack a brown bag dinner, and maybe breakfast too, because we've got to be willing to stand in line all night if we have to.
Wow.
I don't agree with that, and I'm gonna tell you why. Because it is so patronizing to hear elite Black people like Michelle Obama, who was married to Barack and was in the halls of power. And for 8 years, they had the opportunity to make meaningful changes into making voting accessibility better. And they didn't. I mean, I think of Shelby County versus Holder, the 2013 decision, which basically gutted the Voting Rights Act. Okay, there are things that President Obama could have done via executive order to at least make sure that voting was better. and I feel as though they have the audacity to come along with this finger wagging every 2 and 4 years about we need to get out and vote. We need to get out and vote. Well, what are you guys doing? What are the Democrats? What is the Congressional Black Caucus? What are Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer? What measures are you all taking to ensure that Black people have access to the vote and don't have to wait for 8 hours and don't have to pack a lunch and a dinner and a breakfast and wear your comfortable shoes because you can walk in and cast your vote like a normal person, as opposed to having to dedicate your entire day to voting? This isn't fucking 1965. I'm sorry, Ricci, go ahead, hop in there.
No. I didn't even mean to interrupt you. I was just saying that when you brought up Pelosi and Schumer, I just said what ideas that they're bringing or what policy they're bringing. They're kneeling in Kenta cloth. That's what they're bringing.
And this speaks to the problem of like the whole neoliberal democratic ethos, and the systematic problem with it is that it's just showing face or showing, some sort of rhetorical or like visual element that is representative of what the left wants, with none of the policy implications whatsoever. And this is also part of the problem of what the neoliberal Democrats do too, is like they act as if Trump just came out of an alien saucer. It's like ridiculous. Like they're totally historically inept at understanding the legacy of policy that led to Trump being able to win the election. And if they're going to keep saying that, people on the left and people of color have to mobilize in huge numbers, we've already seen that you can't do that if you don't give them an actual reason to vote, if you don't make systemic changes to what your policy platform is. So they keep running out there on this restore America's values, this restore America's dignity nonsense, and it doesn't affect people's daily lives, and it's not relatable at all. And it also just shows that they're incredibly arrogant because they don't realize the incredible problems that their own system has created, that it's fundamentally created the launch board for Trump to become the president of the United States. And if Trump's going to attack them from the left the entire time, you know, that's fine. But like, actually give like left-wing, like progressive policies then. You know, like if he's going to call Kamala Harris like a radical, like Che Guevara leftist, like let's actually get someone who has some policy like that. Like, you know, Trump's going to call you a leftist no matter what. You know, like that's his MO. He's stupid. He doesn't know any other way to go after the Democrats. Like
the president,
he can't
the
have
president
a
is
critique
bad.
of neoliberalism. You know,
the president is bad. Shout out Spike Friedman. He likes to tweet that every day.
Right.
The president is bad.
Right.
I mean,
exactly.
Ina, I wanted to get your take on how at least this is how I received what Michelle Obama said. You know, polling places are being closed in minority neighborhoods. That's why we have to make sure that we turn out. There's a lot of we. She's speaking a lot of French, a lot of we there, Michelle Obama. Like, it seems as though that the Democrats are constantly placing the burden on the least of those in our society, Black and brown people who enjoy democracy the least, at least the facade of a democracy for communities who are marginalized and oppressed, but are calling, the burden is always on us to show up and do the most in order to so-called save this democracy.
Yeah, I mean, what you said was exactly my first thought when I was watching that video. Was, you know, who the fuck is we? Because since, you know, the founding of this country, it's always been the elite and then the people. So I don't know who she's talking about when she's saying we, because I'm pretty sure it wasn't me who had that kind of proximity to power from 2008 to 2016 and pretty much did shit. Yeah, it's really disgusting. And it very much fits into the narrative that this election is being painted out to be, which, you know, if Biden and Harris lose, you know that they're going to pin it on the left again in the way that they did in 2016, rather than acknowledging the fact that they put up a weak candidate who had an evil record of criminalizing the exact people who she claimed to help support. And then they blamed people who didn't vote for her on the left for their loss. And I just feel as if, you know, that we're watching the same thing about to happen again. And it feels like I am going, you know, crazy watching the exact same shit that happened 8 years ago happen again. And it's been, you know, really frustrating. I'm sure everyone has this experience where, you know, they're seeing all the fake woke people that they follow on Instagram or on Twitter say stuff like, if you don't vote for Biden just because you wanted to vote for Bernie, like, you're privileged, you're disgusting, like, you don't understand the issue and you're just as bad as Trump. That kind of rhetoric is just so disgusting. It comes exactly from there where they're putting it on us. Like, if you don't line up to vote and put, you know, your life on the line during COVID to vote for Biden, then this is all your fault. Like, it's just disgusting. It's really gross rhetoric, and it's exactly what you've all been saying. It's purely performative, and it's a way for them to scapegoat, you know, what might be a possible loss because of their own stupid decision.
And there is, too, like a case that you can potentially make from the left to actually, in swing states, go vote for Biden to stop this liberal, you know, to stop this neo-fascist takeover of the government. Because, you know, if Trump gets another 4 years in there, it's going to be really, really terrible. I mean, it's like an existential threat to a lot of communities around the world. But the case to make for Biden is not to make up bullshit about how he's actually a leftist, or like to say that, you know, he is like, you know, a civil rights era leader. That's just horseshit. The case to make for Biden is to say, look, this is a really imperfect person, but these are all the things that Donald Trump will do if he gets another 4 years in office. And we cannot actually allow that to happen. We have to get him in there and push him to the left. That's the only way we can continue to have these broader conversations.
I don't know if Adriel mentioned this last time, but we are working on a project with Roots Action. I don't know if you guys all saw it. We had a launch video with Noam Chomsky, and you know, in the video, and basically we're working on this project. It's a Vote Trump Out project in swing states, but we aren't doing any vote shaming. We aren't trying to make the case for Joe Biden being a progressive leader. Basically, what our whole campaign is focused around: voting is one thing that you do as a politically engaged person. Activism is the real politics. Mutual aid is the real politics. Building community and building, support at a local and state level is politics. Voting is just one thing that we do. And basically the project that we're working on, focusing on Arizona, Michigan, and Wisconsin, is basically to say, like, Joe Biden sucks. Like, we are not a fan of Joe Biden. Like, he has proven to be not great, and we don't have any expectation to, for him to be some sort of progressive leader like the Democratic Party's touting him out to be. But we don't want to face authoritarian fascism if Trump wins. Like, we are encouraging people to stay in the streets, get out and be in the streets, protest for Black Lives Matter, protest for a Green New Deal. But if Trump wins another 4 years, like, these protests and us being in the streets are going to look totally different. Us protesting Joe Biden to move his carbon emission standards to 2030 is different than us, like, this dude may not ever, he may eliminate elections. Who knows what this dude will do with another 4 years. But when you're making that case, let's not make the case that Joe Biden is a modern day FDR. Like, that is a incorrect way to put it.
And people see through that too. They know that he's not a modern day FDR. When they go up there and they spout these lies about, Joe Biden being a civil rights hero and, Joe Biden going to pass the best green energy jobs program your ass has ever seen.
Joe Biden was on the balcony with Martin Luther King, Andrew. You didn't know that? Joe Biden was all there.
I didn't see that photo, but anyway, but yeah.
He was with Mandela, though. He did visit Mandela in jail. So.
Right. Yeah. No, but it just falls on deaf ears because people can see through it. Like, the neoliberals' attempt to try to get people to recognize that he is some progressive doesn't work when people see that he's actually not. Like, when you look at the policies, you can have all the lofty, like, Obama speeches and rhetoric that you want, but the reality is the policies are dramatically impacting the lives of people in America, and particularly people of color, for decades.
All right. my children are being rowdy in the background. Dog, shut up. Shut up. I wanted us to talk about some of the things that are in the Biden-Harris platform, or at least one of the things that is definitely not in it, and that is relief from eviction. We know that we are facing tens of millions of people are set to be evicted from their homes. Let's go through some of those tweets, Dwayne, because people are taking action really across the country and even internationally. I saw an awesome video from people out in Toronto, shout out to the T-Dot, Ontario, who were in the streets mobilizing behind preventing people from being tossed out of their homes. There was action in Detroit. Let's see, I think the eviction moratorium has expired in Indiana, so they're starting to see more evictions. Same thing in St. Louis, and I think this is the case pretty much everywhere all across the country. And I know that the People's City Council of Los Angeles has been front and center against evictions, on the forefront of demanding that rent be canceled. What is the case in the status of things happening in Los Angeles? I feel like Californians are under a lot of pressure between COVID and now the heat wave and now the wildfires and the police guerrilla response to protesters who have been in the streets advocating for Black lives. Ricci, let's start with you in terms of eviction relief and fighting evictions and taking over some empty houses in the Los Angeles area. The actions out there have been pretty varied. Talk to us about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So just to get a base, before the pandemic, we had 60,000 unhoused people in Los Angeles. And I think the numbers are something like 40% of people couldn't afford or were rent insecure. That was before the pandemic, right? So we've had this housing issue for a while now, right? And city council and the mayor have been fucking inept and incompetent, and they've actually have guided us to this point. 3 unhoused people a day in Los Angeles before the pandemic pass away. So all of those numbers, and then now we're in a pandemic, and there have been studies that show up to 400,000 people are at risk of being evicted in the next month. Eviction courts open back up on September 1st, and literally these politicians haven't done shit. There's been a rent lottery, but I think it is a small portion of the amount of people that are going to be affected by this crisis. And, they've totally left the people out to dry. Like in Los Angeles, 7 of the now 14 members, because one of them was indicted by the FBI, 7 of them are landlords, right? So when they are proposing motions and laws and regulations, they aren't looking out for the renters or unhoused people in Los Angeles. It's simply a class solidarity thing with them. They aren't going to put the burden on landlords. Although over 60% of people in Los Angeles are renters. And so that's just like where we're at right now. And like, if people think things are bad now and you think we've been in the streets, like wait till things blow up in September. There's a whole lot of things that like this conversation can go towards, but we post elected officials, addresses and phone numbers on Twitter, and they've been upset about it because they think they are putting them at risk of people showing up to their house to protest. Yet there's been no violence and no property destruction. Side note: my personal Twitter account is permanently suspended because I posted the sheriff's address on there, and I was mass reported. Fuck Alex Nueva, the sheriff of LA. But speaking of the sheriff is going to be the one that carries out the evictions. And so we are in like a crazy crisis right now. And if things don't change, things are going to burn in Los Angeles. Things are going to blow up soon.
Ina, I mean, without a doubt, evictions are also a form of police violence. When the police show up to your home and forcibly remove you, your family, and your possessions to where you had been previously laying your head, without a doubt, that is traumatizing to you. And that is a form of violence, to forcibly become unhoused in that way. In terms of support, I looked at the Biden-Harris platform, and they don't have anything specific when it comes to helping people deal with the eviction crisis, not even on the federal level. I think the Trump administration at least proposed a suspension of mortgages for people who have federally backed home mortgages. But when I looked on the Biden website, what I did find is a support for a bill proposed by House Majority Whip James Clyburn and backed by a number of other Democrats. I think Ro Khanna actually is in support of this bill. I can't recall. Dwayne, pull it up. I have it in the rundown. I can't recall the name of it off the top of my head, but the web domain starts with Majority Whip. But anyway, basically what this bill does, all it offers is legal advice, free legal support for renters to go to eviction court. But you still stand a good possibility of getting put the fuck out. Like, the bill doesn't do anything to stop you from losing your house. It helps you to go to court in a venue where you may or may not be victorious. I mean, in what ways does the People's City Council really advocate for evictions to stop in ways that the government can reach out and help make that happen?
Yeah, I mean, so something that we've seen, right from the beginning is that in terms of, housing justice and housing policy, there is no daylight between what Trump believes, and what Eric Garcetti believes, or really even like what Gavin Newsom believes, because all of them are pretty much doing shit for renters and homeowners. And yeah, Donald Trump might say fuck poor people to your face, but Eric Garcetti will like turn to his buddy and then say fuck poor people. So there's not really a difference except in optics and rhetoric. And what we've been fighting to do is to get, at least some semblance or modicum of an acknowledgement of what really the entire state is going through right now. So one of the things that we're really fighting hard for is true rent and mortgage cancellation. we've seen a lot of mixed rhetoric coming from the city and from the state saying, okay, well, you're not going to get evicted right now, but you'll have to pay back all of the rent in like 3 months, which is insane and impossible, because if you lost your job because of COVID and you couldn't pay rent because of that, you still might not have a job. And even if you did, you're not going to get paid 3 times more in a way that you can be able to pay back the rent. So those are really unfeasible and in just a way of prolonging evictions. And other similar things are doing that, like what you had mentioned, like fighting for a right to counsel, like that is obviously huge, because if you're facing eviction, you're not entitled to a lawyer. But just because we pass right to counsel doesn't mean, we can call it a wrap and everyone in the state will be okay. We want truly radical action right now on canceling rent and mortgage so that people don't have to pay it back and don't have to think about that, so that they're actually safe from evictions instead of just continuing to prolong the crisis and hoping that, people will stop paying attention.
I'm coming to you in a second, Andrew. From the comments really quickly, Answers Questioned says Mnuchin sees evictions just as a business opportunity, just like 2008. Solomon says it's going to be a modern day Hooverville, tent cities. Andrew, for God's sakes, we are already coming towards the end of summer. It is in no one's best interest, politicians, developers, landlords, etc., to have tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people potentially homeless as we approach winter, as we're still in the midst of a fucking global pandemic. Biden and Harris could really, really open up some daylight for themselves if they threw out the correct proposal to their base, and hopefully even to some people who are undecided, who live in swing states, of course, specifically. I know people who live in safe states are going to say fuck Joe Biden, like myself. But if you live in a contested state, yes, Joe Biden maybe still be trying to volley for your vote. What can the Democrats do here? They have to fucking do something, because unless they don't, it's going to be a very, very cold winter for a lot of folks.
Yeah, the Democrats are basically all in on optics right now. That's pretty much their campaign slogan. So they really need to, actually have a federally backed program that deals with the money that people don't have to pay for this rent that's caused by COVID. What you call that, or what that actually is, they can call it, Biden housing care for all they want. But it has to achieve the objective of getting rid of all the money that people owe through no fault of their own because of this crisis, because they lost their job. Housing is a right. Housing is a human right. Water is a human right. Healthcare is a human right. And so, Biden and Harris fail to acknowledge some of those basic things. They've walked back Medicare for all, and they have not undergone the revolution of values that other people in the society are going through right now. And we were talking before about, the defunding of police and stuff like that. That has to happen in order to provide some level of resources to deal with this rent and housing and, sustainability situation. But the real money is honestly in the DOD. The Department of Defense is the most bloated budget in the history of the entire world. So, they spent, $1 trillion on a plane program and then have no idea wherever that money went, or just lost it. So, that's where we need to get the resources at. We need to make the connection between the police state, people being out on the streets and not having access to quality housing as a right, as it should be, and also connect it to our foreign intervention and our foreign policy overseas, and how that's incredibly militaristic and wastes our public resources that we could be investing in our people, that we could be using to deal with housing issues in LA and places across the world and across America.
And see, that's why I know the Democrats are so full of shit when they say Black Lives Matter, because all of these issues orbit Black lives, right? From the eviction crisis, because we know a majority of renters are Black and brown, to the coronavirus crisis, people who are frontline workers, essential workers, overwhelmingly Black and brown, bearing the brunt of this virus, dying at disproportionate rates. And yet their talking points always lead with Trump, and we have to save the fucking democracy, but they don't ever talk about saving Black lives, or they don't ever put forth substantive policies that will specifically address these issues. I mean, the housing crisis, that scares the shit out of me. I mean, I especially as with the coronavirus and as we head towards colder months, it is going to be something that none of us have ever witnessed in our lifetime. And that is terrifying. Because, I mean, my grandparents are old enough to experience the Depression, and they say that shit was terrible. and I believe them. And I don't want us to have to endure that, and our friends and neighbors and loved ones to have to endure that. But we are on like the slowest course for a car crash. It's like witnessing a car crash in slow motion. Like, we can see the shit coming, but no one is actually taking, people who are in power are not taking the necessary movements in order to prevent it from happening. It drives me nuts. Sorry. Keep banging the table. My dog's looking at me. Yes. Go ahead, Ricci.
Oh, no, I'm just saying there are reports that up to 40 million people nationwide are going to be facing eviction due to inability to pay rent. In comparison, in 2008, that 10 million people lost their homes. And so, like, when you bring up the point about Great Depression and shit, like, we are actually headed towards that. We're headed towards modern day Hoovervilles. Like, it's not like, pretty soon that idea and that concept is going to be our political reality. And then, this discussion, which I believe, your original point or your original question to Ina was about like the Biden-Harris platform and what they're doing for rent cancellation or evictions. Like, I think AOC was the only one who uttered the words or anything about rent or struggling to pay rent during the DNC. And so just wrapping all of that together, like, we are staring down a true crisis in America. And the people that the Democratic Party are putting at the heads and the face of the ticket are just like, they aren't prepared to handle the crisis that's going to come to us. And there are options that the left has been pushing for to potentially get us out of this crisis, like the Green New Deal with a jobs guarantee, since all millions and millions of people have lost their jobs that are never coming back. And this is like a side note. What was considered like the normal before this, we're never going back to that world. Like, we are never going to back to what life was like before COVID. And so, as a party of the on the left, like, what are we doing to get us through that? What are we doing to get us to the future? And right now, it's like, what the fuck? Nothing.
A lot of what the fuck. And speaking of nothing, we're still dealing with the issue of the Postal Service being under attack. And yes, the Postal Service has tremendous consequence for the November election. But even in the interim, in the immediate need, people are waiting for their medications. They're waiting for the checks. They're waiting for very important shit to come through the mail. And Trump's appointee, Louis DeJoy, has made it his mission to render the post office impotent, basically, having sorting machines taken out, removing mailboxes, denying postal workers overtime, and just basically throwing the system into a state of chaos and disarray. And I wanted us to listen from some postal workers in Charlotte, North Carolina. This video is actually from the Charlotte Observer, where they were at a protest, really, of some of the postal workers, and the people were explaining some of the challenges that they're dealing with and how drastically protocols have changed in the Postal Service since DeJoy took the helm. Let's take a look at that, Dwayne.
Personally, because I'm on the overtime desire list, the 10 hours, 12 hours, and day so. And recently, they haven't been doing a lot of calling us to come in for overtime. So now it's like, you do your 8 hours, and then they tell you to, get over the clock. You got to get over the clock. Or some days, if you're lucky enough, you can get 10 hours a day. But at first, it used to be like at least 12 hours every day. 12 hours for the regulars every day. So yeah, people are not happy about it.
And not only are they taking the overtime, they're taking the machines, and now we're having staffing issues.
I think a lot of times when we make laws, or in this particular case, that's a rule that he made internally, we must always look at the impact. And I just believe that even the changes that he went in and made, he never expected the outcry across this country. he thought that maybe the post office didn't matter and postal service didn't matter to people. So I mean, those are the kinds of questions that I want answered. Why'd you turn these machines off? For what purpose? Why now? I'm going to ask him if he realizes who's impacted. I mean, veterans. I mean, and in fact, who really uses the mail service? You know, and now because of COVID, there are more people who have to use it.
Andrew, we know that the Republicans have had the post office in their sights for literally decades now. What's happened has been sudden, but it's not necessarily new. The attempts to destroy the Postal Service go back even George W. Bush and before. But when we look at how perhaps Trump might have shot himself in the foot by doing this, because so many of his supporters are rural people who depend on the U.S. Postal Service for a lot of things, not just getting mail, but, you know, paying bills, getting money orders. How many seniors who rely on the Postal Service looking for the Social Security checks? I mean, a good chunk of America is unbanked. They do not use banks. So they will cash their check maybe at the post office. I mean, you know, and are waiting for, you know, financial instruments that are not electronic banking. So can Trump get this together beforehand? But before you answer that, I want us to look at Nancy Pelosi's tweet. That's what I meant to do. Nancy Pelosi actually talked to Postmaster Louis DeJoy, and he basically told her to kick fucking rocks. All right. And she told everybody this. She put this on Twitter. Pop up them tweets, Dwayne. Nancy Pelosi talks to DeJoy. I put it in the story doc that DeJoy basically told her to fuck off. So that's what it would be under. But I can't. You have to put them up so I can read them to the people because they're waiting for them. Hurry up, Dwayne. Hurry up, Dwayne. It's kind of embarrassing, like how Nancy Pelosi just admitted that they didn't have any power, the House Democrats, that is. And the House Democrats, as you know, have been called back to session by the Speaker. And they were actually working specifically on a bill to fund the post office. However, there's already reports out that the Republicans are whipping their caucus in an effort to block this post office funding bill for, I think, $25 billion to get the post office together. There we go. Nancy Pelosi, pop them joints up, make them joints bigger. You know Granny ain't got her glasses on, Dwayne. Nancy Pelosi says, earlier today I spoke with Postmaster General DeJoy regarding his alleged pause in operational changes. Hey, that's cool. All right, you can, okay, there we go. During our conversation, he admitted that he has no intention of replacing the sorting machines, blue mailboxes, and other infrastructure that have been removed. I'm gonna read that for y'all one more time. DeJoy says he has no intentions of replacing the sorting machines, blue mailboxes, and other infrastructure that have been removed. This, taken with his unwillingness to plan for adequate worker overtime, directly jeopardizes the election and threatens to disenfranchise voters in communities of color while slowing delivery of medicines to veterans. Why did Nancy Pelosi tell everybody that Louis DeJoy told her to go jump in the lake? I mean, that, to me, that is a little bit of blatant disrespect to the House Speaker. Not that I care if people show Nancy Pelosi office respect at all, but the fact of the matter is that this is another example of the Democrats' ineptitude, their inability to enforce anything that the Trump administration puts forth, including restoration of normal post office services. Ina, why are the Democrats so feckless and just fucking useless at like the worst possible time? Like, we need them to hold the balls, so to speak, and they just outright refuse to do it.
What was that analogy before Ina goes? Hold the balls.
Anyway,
sorry.
It's like, where to begin? But I remember my first thought being, this is just yet another example of the Democrats, instead of recognizing their own failure, putting it on either their opposing party or putting it on the general populace. Like, the amount of Instagram infographics I've seen of people who are like, go buy stamps, go save our post office. Like, it's on you. Like, if so many people buy stamps and saved, like, that is just one perfect example of how the U.S. right now is essentially a failed state. that we're outsourcing our leadership to Instagram so we can get people to buy postage, which is insane because this isn't a matter of the post office not having enough money because people aren't using it enough. It's a matter of control, and how, the current administration has systematically fought to essentially end the postal service. And the Democrats, again, have completely squandered all power in this situation to be able to actually get anything done. I don't even have a good answer for why they're like this, because there's just so many things to hate about them and to understand. But, I'll just say it's pretty clear that we're heading to an illegitimate election. And unless, we somehow figure out a way to get the Democrats to actually do shit with the power that they have, I would doubt the outcome of the upcoming election.
I mean, is there any way for the Democrats to be obstinate, in a parliamentarian sort of way? Are there any ways that they can maneuver in the chamber to put something in place to bring DeJoy to heel? Or does, again, I feel like they're just looking on pretty helplessly, like, oh man, yeah, this is bad, guys. And it's like, wait a second, y'all, we sent y'all to Congress to actually be in opposition to this agenda, but instead, it seems as though Trump is moving full speed ahead. Andrew Corkery.
Yeah, no, I mean, there are some ways that the Democrats, the public hearings with DeJoy come up, will certainly do something about that when on the spot in the public, and then the public kind of has a sense of what exactly he's doing. Now, obviously, the right wing will try to say that's just a bunch of political theater and so forth. But this is kind of before about the fact that a lot of Trump supporters aren't actually getting in. They're not actually security checks, things that they actually need. This is kind of the beauty of the moronic nature of Trump. I mean, he sees these things that he wants to utilize in order to make his political reign more powerful, but then he is totally inept and clueless what the consequences are of doing certain things that could affect his own political viability in his own case. So I think that that's honestly the Trump era, is that if he was in at all competent, it would be way more authoritarian tendencies. The fact that sabotage was constantly is kind of hope for Democrats, but then they squander it by actually fixing the systemic problems and or placating different times when they could really think of substantive change.
I mean, Ricci, the murder of the failed state talking about fascists in power is the post. Stop it.
Yeah, and so this is kind of like an example. This and COVID of like a little bit of have that they couldn't have, like Joe Biden wouldn't have fucked up COVID. Joe Biden probably doesn't want to destroy the USPS. Those are legitimate differences you can make with Joe Biden and Donald Trump. But to the point of general, like people, Black Lives Matter is the social movement of all time, right? People are hitting the like crazy. You know, Ina, People City Council, and myself have been out there weekly, fighting for change. And Democrats, like, they had to be forced to come back to Washington instead of staying there. Like, I don't care if things that they can do to bring this in. Why don't they follow up at DeJoy? They do something like important to them. These members and staffers put their bodies on the line, because it's like the American people can only do. Why doesn't the Democratic Party step and do something? Direct action. It's just show really care. If you can't do anything, administratively, then show us that like actually care and go to this.
That's part of what the Democrats do. They don't make things politically toxic for Trump. They accept of what Trump to what Trump. They have to get out in front of this and change the narrative on this story so that it becomes politically toxic for Trump to even touch it. You know, and that's part of what I'm talking about too. Is just doing direct action. You know, make sure that everything is published about like exactly he's doing. The outlet about it ad nauseum about how the American people get involved, go to Georgia House and like do all these other things, and they're just like, oh, we don't know what the fuck we're supposed to do. And it's like, no, like get a game plan together. You have to make this politically tough. Trump. You can't accept politics on his terms. You have to change the narrative, and this is what Democrats do. Like they run from issues and they run, and Trump Republicans mold polls. They change polls. Change people's things, and is unable to do it for whatever reason.
Yeah, I have to hop off or so. No, I know you wanted to talk shit.
Well, then I will give the last comments to you to on Eric Garcia. Jump right on his head. It's all.
Before we start that, rush on Eric. Problematic rush.
Wow. Well, Ricci has a
now
question.
everyone. Go ahead, Enos. Take it away.
Take it away. Garcetti, wow, he's gone.
I mean, I think so many of the today about Democrats and about Biden is also perfectly applicable to Eric Garcetti. He's Biden's national campaign chair. It's basically political, also personal. And he's picked the most politically convenient possible thing to do. He's never showed announced for Black and brown communities in LA. Los Angeles is suffering this crisis that existed before the pandemic, suffering from observation because of the pandemic, the public health crisis of COVID that Garcetti watched, all of these things, he's just in the city and in the DNC and get praised by minded idiots about what an incredible job he's doing and basically maintaining the quote for the white so, you know, in summation, you know, fuck Garcetti. And I really am frustrated by the idea that anyone outside of the city, as some political leader, everyone inside, just absolutely hates him. And I can't say I hate his guts because he doesn't have.
Ricci, go ahead. You get the last on Eric Garcetti, which I everything that you guys are saying, y'all will absolutely say it to his face because y'all showed up at his house on his front lawn. So, go ahead.
Well, everyone watching, Garcetti.com. We have a list of why we say Garcetti. And it's just like so important for us to how bad Eric Garcetti is because he has these big political aspirations, right? He wants to be something else other than the mayor of Los Angeles. We deaded that. We're making sure that will never happen. This dude is a fucking like Dr. Melina Abdul to say he's a liberal supremacist, and it's true. Eric holds these racist systems just as much as Donald Trump does. Under Eric Garcetti's over 6 died at the